Hello, my name is Garion Altenberg, and I am a research associate with Buddhist Bodies Collective. Um, and I'm here today with Dr. Natasha Heller from the University of Virginia. She is an associate professor there in the Religious Studies Department. We are talking about the gender disparity in citation practices.
Thanks so much for having me. So I got into this in part because I was on kind of an email chain and someone, I commented that a conference didn't seem to have very many women on it, and was told, well, we can't find any women. And I thought, well, that seems strange to me. Because I know lots of women who do these kinds of things. And so that kind of got, stuck in my head. And I was like, there's a problem here. And so I guess like the first way that I got into it was like, I didn't want people to be able to say, we can't find any women on this topic. So along with Elena Velusi, who is at Loyola University in Chicago, we worked to found something called the Women in the Study of Asian Religions, which is a website database that allows people to search on different topics. So if they are looking for a female scholar on a certain topic, they can find them. And sort of as an outgrowth of that, I got interested in how the disparity not only in conferences but in journal publications. It's because the other we get these like emails or you see it on social media that there's an announcement of a conference, or an announcement of a new issue of a journal, and pretty much the first thing that I do is I count the number of women in that journal issue or in that conference. And of course, like if you're counting like an individual issue, it doesn't really give you a sense of what the total scope. So then I had this opportunity. Our libraries here, University of Virginia libraries, sponsor what are called research sprints. So a couple summers ago, I participated in one of these, and I had the support of librarians to do some research on how many women appear in different journals related to Buddhist studies. And then from there, that was kind of the first phase of the project. And then from there, we did a kind of smaller sample study of citation patterns, like who is citing different articles.
So with Buddhist Bodies Collective, we did a textbook review. So I was put in charge of figuring out what some of the most popular textbooks are in Buddhist studies at the moment. And then ahead of a workshop we held in February, we circulated a video to workshop participants where I kind of went through these textbooks. And then Doctors Balkwell, Stephanie Balkwell, and Amy Langenberg, who are the primary investigators for Buddhist Bodies Collective, encouraged me, based on your own work on this topic, to go and count the number of women and the number of men who are cited in the intro textbooks that I was looking at. And so what I'd like to do is share some of these numbers with you and see if this meshes a little bit with what you're seeing in the field, or ask you some questions about why you think the numbers may be the way they are. The first number I found is that men are cited more frequently than women at a ratio of 4-to-1 in intro textbooks on Buddhism. And if we want to be a little more specific about this number, we can see that it's 4.2-to-1 in recommended further readings and 4.3-to-1 in bibliographies and reference pages. And so I wonder if this is a little bit surprising to you, or if this is in line with what you were finding in your work on journals and other publications in the field of Buddhist studies.
Yeah, I'd say that this looks about what I would expect. That it doesn't strike me as surprising. So when we looked at, for those of you in Buddhist studies, you know that like the Journal of the International Association of Buddhist Studies is in some sense the flagship journal of the field. Given that the International Association of Buddhist Studies is the main scholarly organization. Obviously, people in Buddhist studies present it in lots of other contexts. But so that was one of our kind of targets of journals to look at. And basically, we found that, from 1978 to 2017, and many of these journals have kind of a rolling date, which they're available online. And so we stopped it at 2017. 17% were by female authors, right? And then 79% were by men. And so that's like that long span of 1978 to 2017. And then if we have a shorter span of 2007 to 2017, we see that it's 24% women. And so that seems like more or less in line with your figures. And we could, like it varies a little bit by journals, and that there's certain kinds of journals where you'd see a higher percentage of women, but that seems to me like a fairly reasonable or representative kind of number.
Do you think this speaks to the actual demographics in the field?
I mean, so that's interesting. And so here I would have to cite research done by Susie Andrews of Mount Allison University and Michelle Wong of Georgetown. And they surveyed 42 universities in North America to get an idea of how many women are teaching in Buddhist studies. And so then they got a breakdown by, assistant, associate, and full. And of course, at full, it's the lowest. It's 21.6%. Associate is 27.5%, and then assistant 33.3%. So, I think the numbers you're seeing fall between full and associate there. So it's a little bit less than if you were to consider like the younger cohort of Buddhist studies, but more or less in line with kind of more senior scholars in the field. I should say on that data, like one of the things that we don't know is like how do people fall out of it? Like that doesn't reflect who has gotten PhDs in Buddhist studies, who does not have a permanent position in Buddhist studies, right? People who are working as adjuncts or a contingent faculty won't show up in those statistics.
If a chapter specifically is about gender or women, the ratio evens out to nearly 1-to-1. And so I wondered if you would like to think about what could be going on here.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that you do see is that when I went through the Journal of the International Association of Buddhist Studies, which I love saying over and over again, when you go through the issues like one by one, and then all of a sudden you get like this, this issue that has a lot of women in it, you can go to the table of contents and realize that it's a special issue on nuns or gender or something. So you do see women publishing probably more on topics related to women. I just want to sort of raise an issue like, when is sort of gender in the picture, right? And so that's not always, when somebody writes an article that says like, this is about Buddhist nuns, then we can say, okay, let's count this as something that's about women or about gender. But I think we should not sort of ignore the fact that writing about men is also writing about gender.
Works authored or translated by women make up less than 10% of citations in introductory chapters in our some of the most popular textbooks in our field. What kind of a message do you think this might send to our students?
Yeah, I mean, that number is, I think, way out of line with sort of the overall statistics, right? Whether it's like women in the field of Buddhist studies, itself as instructors, and way out of line with the average of women authored articles in individual journals, right? Like that looks like maybe an individual, like one issue from 1978 or something, right? Like that's where you get those kinds of statistics where it's 10%. I think about sort of the issue of women in the field of Buddhist studies and sort of citation as a kind of ecosystem, right? Like, I mentioned sort of women that do not end up in sort of tenure track positions. And so in some sense are in a different part of the system, right? And so what does that mean for publication and so forth? But then, what does the balance of journal articles, and we haven't really talked about, there we could also throw in sort of editors, right? Like, if the editors are mostly male, does that shape the ecosystem in certain ways? And so sort of taking this sort of ecosystem metaphor a little bit further, I kind of wonder if we're seeing something like biomagnification in these introductory chapters of these introductory textbooks, right? And so, like the biomagnification is like this idea that the concentration of toxins up the food chain, right? Like a little mouse eats a poisoned seed, then a snake eats the mice, and then the hawk eats the snake, and the hawk ends up with sort of the most potent concentration of the toxin. And so I kind of wonder if there's something similar going on here, where that the textbooks are I think from the list that you shared of me of the ones that you were looking at are more likely to be written by senior white men. They may be appealing to their own immediate scholarly network, which is probably, you know, their cohort is more likely to, you know, look like them. They're probably a little bit more likely to, and this would be an interesting thing to track, to cite somewhat older works. I don't know if this is actually the case. And so that all those sort of choices end up kind of concentrating the effects of gender in those introductory sections. So that would be kind of my speculation as to what might be going on there.
I like this concept of an ecosystem, and I wonder how far we could maybe push the metaphor of an ecosystem.
I mean, I think so the flip side is like, what are the effects of these intro chapters or these intro textbooks, right? Like, what does that how does that affect the ecosystem? And that's where we don't have a lot of data, right? Like, if we look at, you know, what are the effects of on undergraduate students? Does somebody open this up and say, like, first of all, like, there aren't very many women working on Buddhism, or if you want to work on a topic related to women or gender, the female gender, that's not sort of central to Buddhist studies. So I don't think we have very many studies on how that sort of plays out. The studies on like women at the head of the classroom, like what it means to have a female instructor, that's been kind of mixed. But we do have like sort of other data where, you know, and this is not speaking in terms of Buddhist studies, because Buddhist studies is too small for anyone to do any of these studies on. And I'm not even sure we have them for religious studies. But, you know, we can see that if you look at sort of institutions, right, at least in the United States, at the undergraduate level, there are more female students than there are male, by like a smidge, in almost every single university, right? And I don't know if that holds true in Canada or if that's a different situation.
I think that's also true for us as well, at least in the social sciences and humanities, I think. Yeah.
And so but then if you watch sort of how it goes up through like doctoral programs, basic, and then, you know, professors, essentially that ratio flips, right? And so this is what people, using a different metaphor, call the pipeline problem. You know, and so what causes that? And so I don't think have good studies on the effects of that. You know, do students notice, for example, that a syllabus has more women on it or no women on it? Do students notice that they're being assigned texts? I don't know.
Dr. Heller, I wonder if there's anything we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about.
I would just add that I think it's actually a really valuable practice to do this kind of counting, right? That we can have this kind of sense that there's some sort of disparity, but without counting it, we don't really know what it is. And so that, you know, projects like what you've worked on with the textbooks are really valuable, but we can also do this kind of personally, that I've been trying to sort of track in my own syllabuses, you know, what is the ratio there? And even in my own scholarship, you know, like, am I being attentive to making sure that I am citing equally or tipping the balance a bit in what I cite? And that means counting things, right? Like you have to do that counting. So just sort of counting as a kind of scholarly practice.